Welcome back, everybody. I know it's been quite a while, but good news, I got a new job. It's working completely different hours, daytimes, office hours, rather than evenings, so it's taking a while for me to adjust. But enough of that boring real-life stuff. Let's get on to the important things, painting tattoos and war paint. The first thing I'm going to cover is painting tattoos, and for that we are using 3 colors: red leather, German gray, and Oxford blue. The red leather is the skin color that I used on the miniature. The German gray is to give us that black ink look of tattoo, and the Oxford blue is to lighten up the gray a little bit. The reason we add the red leather, or whatever flesh color you used on your miniature, is because we don't want the tattoo to look like it's painted on. A tattoo is kind of under the skin, so we add the red leather to soften the tattoo color and give it a slight hue of that color that we used for the base coat. Getting the right color is the hard part. The easy part, sort of, is painting the pattern on your miniature. I suggest keeping this rather simple. Here I'm just doing some swirl marks on our miniature, and I'm not trying to paint the smallest possible thing I can. What I am doing is just painting a line, essentially a curved line. I'm kind of doing it as thin as I can for the first stroke, and then once I have the basic shape, I can go back and fill it out. And as I fill it out, I smooth it to take care of any little bumps or little errors that I made. So just one big brush stroke to begin with, a long brush stroke to begin with, and then a few others just to fatten out, in this case, our little swirls. For the pattern you're doing, I would stay away from any extremely complex tattoos, no Sistine Chapel paintings on an arm. Keep it fairly simple because these are going to be more visible on your tabletop from a couple feet away. If you make it too complex, then no one's going to be able to see all that fine, fancy tattoos you added to your miniature. As I mentioned before, we want the tattoo to look like it's part of the skin and not just painted on it. One way to do that is to add the red leather, and another way is to glaze over the tattoo once it's down. As hopefully you know, I'm a big proponent of using glazes, especially on skin, because it really adds life to the miniature. In this particular case, I'm adding a mix of red leather and pastel pink. This is a glaze, so this is a very, very, very thin layer. We're talking 1 to 10 paint to water. And this is a highlight glaze, so I'm only going over the highlighted areas on the miniature. And this is putting a slight film over the tattoos to more blend them into the skin. Following that, with a shade glaze, this time Vallejo Model Color Violet Red. And again, the reason for this is exactly the same, putting a thin film over the tattoos so they look more a part of the skin than just resting on top. So not only does this blend in the tattoo, but it also makes the skin look much more interesting as we add nice vibrant color to the shade areas. Ideally, I would have done a mid-tone glaze on this miniature as well, but the skin was already looking a little bit dark and I didn't want to darken it anymore. So there you go, very simple technique. Just glaze over the skin and also make sure you mix in some of your flesh base coat with your German gray or whatever mixture you decided to use. Now moving on to woad, or more of a war paint look. And this is going to be just slightly different. Before we get onto that, just a quick blooper. I originally started off with Stormy Blue and the skin color that I used for the miniature, which was dwarf skin. Now, as you can see, what I wanted was kind of a brightish or dark blue color, but I got more of a gray color because the recessed colors in those paints just didn't mix well together. I ended up with a gray. So even though I use those colors quite often independently. Mixing them together, I got a bad mix. So rather than using the dwarf skin that I used on the miniature, I had to switch to Vallejo Model Color Beige Red, and then also I went with Magic Blue rather than the Stormy Blue. So just a little fun fact for you there. Even though I used dwarf skin on the miniature, I could not use that for our Warpaint. So for this mixture, since I wanted it on the skin and not under the skin, I went with a much more blue mixture. As I said, I still have some of the flesh color in there. I have some German gray, but the prominent color is blue. Even though I want this brighter than the tattoos, I don't want this color as bright as, say, the clothing. So still want to tone it down a little bit, just not as much as the tattoos. Now for painting this one, I went a little bit more freestyle, a bit more carefree, which is a dangerous thing to do. Sometimes you want to plan out your painting a little bit better than I do. See, I kind of just started with a stripe on the back and then organically just grew out from there. Did a little swirl over there, a little dog leg here. Mainly switched to swirls as the pattern continued on around the miniature. One thing you want to avoid when doing this is changing the direction that you are pulling the brush. What I mean by that is if you are, say, dragging the brush down and then you go to your upper right, let's say, that changes the orientation of the tip of the brush on the miniature and it distorts the line you are trying to draw. So it's hard to do on camera, but you may find it easier to actually hold the brush steady and move the miniature around when you're trying to do delicate long lines. Another tip I can give you is if you have a really long line you want to paint, or a big, somewhat complex swirl like I'm about to do on his chest, rather than trying to do that all in one go, may help if you put dots down first. Put a dot at the beginning of the line, put a dot at the end of the line, maybe one or two as the swirl goes around, and that gives you a guide to make sure you don't end up cutting your swirl too short or go off in a wrong direction. So basically just connecting the dots. You may find it a little bit easier to paint a complex pattern if you plan it out slightly with just a few dots first. Also, when you're doing something delicate like this, be sure you have a damp brush handy. You can see I made a little mistake there. I quickly just grabbed a clean, wet brush and wiped it away. So I can let that dry now and repaint that area. Also, adding a little glaze medium slows down the dry time of your paint. Always good for freehand painting. I did not add any here because sometimes I like to live dangerously. And that's it for our war painted Celt. As you can see, this time I did not bother with any glazes over the skin because this needs to be a little bit more prominent. So I hope this quick video gave you an idea of different ways you could paint tattoos and war paint and the difference between the two. And it really spices up a barbarian or kind of a muscle-bound miniature. And as you can see, it's quite easy to do. Just start with very thin lines and fatten them out, and make sure you adjust your tattoo or war paint, the mixture you're using, accordingly. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Watch out for snakes.